Yeah. In terms of my decision to go to West Point and the uh, implications to Vietnam, Vietnam actually was not on the radar screen when I was a senior in high school and making a decision to go to West Point. Had never heard of the country and was not aware of anything going on at that point in time. And the reasons I went to West Point, my mom and dad loved General Eisenhower, and the fact that he was a graduate of West Point was something that was motivational. And also, there was a fellow by the name of Pete Dawkins, who was a cadet up at West Point when I was in high school, won the Heisman Trophy, and was a great guy. And so that's what attracted me to West Point, and I was very happy to get in. Moving to the next question, uh, in terms of the reason for the U.S. getting involved in the Vietnam War, uh, at that time it was the height of the Cold War, as it was referred to, and the communism, countries like the Soviet Union and China, they were pretty rapidly taking over a lot of smaller countries out in that part of the world. And so starting with President Eisenhower, but then really President Kennedy and then President Johnson, they determined that the U.S. needed to take a stand, and they decided to make that stand in Vietnam and to help the South Vietnamese prevent the North Vietnamese from taking over their country and having it become a communist country. So those were the reasons why the U.S. decided to get into Vietnam at the time. Now, as far as whether I agreed or not with those reasons, at the time I did agree with those reasons. I felt that it was a valid reason why our country needed to help a smaller country, a democracy at the time, try to resist the spread of communism. Later on, however, the more I learned about the situation, it became clear that Ho Chi Minh, the leader of North Vietnam, was more of a nationalist rather than a communist. In other words, he was more concerned about having independence for his country than necessarily taking over other countries. He did want to unify Vietnam into one country, unite North and South. But later on, I became very skeptical about the validity of those reasons why we got into the war, and I was very much in favor of our getting out of that war as soon as possible. As far as daily life as a soldier in Vietnam, it was terrible, in a word, in a life-threatening environment every day, and unfortunately I lost exactly 25 West Point classmates lost their lives as young officers in Vietnam. None of them reached the age of 27 before they were killed. They all are buried up at West Point at this time. So the daily life as a soldier was not a very pleasant one. As far as the specific job in a unit, I was with a infantry company of the 173rd Airborne Brigade, and the job was basically to serve as a lieutenant, a junior officer in that unit the whole time I was over there in Vietnam. As far as the unit's job, our company's job, 173rd Airborne Brigade, very bluntly, our job was to kill or capture as many enemy soldiers as possible, and at the same time try to help the innocent civilians in the area where we were working, up near Laos, Cambodia, and where Vietnam came together to help innocent civilians stay safe. So that was our job. As far as the media's portrayal of the war, I thought it was often unfair and misguided, and I felt the focus of the media should have been more on the civilian leadership, the president and his cabinet and his senior leaders. In our government, the civilian leadership are the ones who make the decisions. The soldiers are only the ones who carry out those decisions, and I thought that the role of the soldier was often unfairly portrayed. As far as anti-war protesters, I would put them into two categories. Number one, those with genuine concerns about the war, perhaps the war in general. There are those in the Mormon religious faith who are just against any kind of war. So I think where people had genuine beliefs, I was okay with that. But there were many, frankly, who used their concerns about the war as a convenient excuse to duck responsibility and avoid service to their country in the war. And I thought that was cowardly. So I didn't have a positive feeling about many of the anti-war protesters. Finally, getting back to everyday life after the war, was it difficult? Not really. A great wife, Carol, great daughters, great friends. My daughters, Jenny and Lisa and Kathy, wonderful family, wonderful friends, and they made the adjustment back to civilian life actually very easy. I hope these answers to Matt Gillis's questions have been helpful, and I wish you all good success in your class. Thank you very much.